Well, it's been a big few episodes here on NBL now. And with the latest news that we've heard today on Tuesday from Bryce Cotton's podcast opening up about his exit from the Perth Wildcats. Well, I've got the owner from the Perth Wildcats, Mark Arena, joining me right now to discuss that. And I really appreciate your time, Mark. I know it's been a lot going on social media in the current society we live in. Firstly, thank you for jumping on. And let's get maybe straight into it because it's on the back of Bryce's podcast where he opens up about how he technically didn't leave the club. Can you maybe elaborate on that and how it all came about?
Yeah, I'll just say, just kind of setting the context, was, we unfortunately, it's one of those years when we have over 2/3 of our roster out of contract. And, that's a massive thing. And unfortunately, that's because, the NBL, for all the teams, we're only allowed maximum 3-year contracts. So it happened to be one of the years when a vast majority of the team was out. And, the reality is any team that has Bryce on it will look different to a team without, and our roster is no exception. And we felt we certainly gave Bryce as much time as we could, um, and and I think we probably would have been able to give more time if we didn't have so many players out of contract. But ultimately, our role is to build a team that can win a championship, and we felt. Even now, still feel that we had to move on and start building that team and that roster. And, if you look at what we've done since Bryce, the announcement went about Bryce is, we've re-signed Christian Doolittle, Dylan Windler, Sunday Detch, and a number of others. So, they probably, they may have happened anyway, they may not have. But yeah, we, like I said, we really had to move on and get moving to build the roster.
Well, it's come out throughout the season when that original extension was put to Bryce, and he mentioned again on the podcast that he wanted to wait till the end of the season to test free agency. On that player's side, where he's going to wait and do that for the decision, take us through maybe that club land where it's like, okay, well, if Bryce is going to go that time, taking a little bit longer, that timeline, as you said, with all these guys out of contract for us and guys like Christian Doolittle who have been playing a lot better from when they originally got signed, and you want to try and keep them, and that deal is going to change. I'm assuming it's just a whole lot different to deal with. And as you said, there's a time limit where, as a club, we're going to have to kind of make a decision where if we wait too long, we're going to be hamstrung if he decides not to come back, which obviously in the end, we've seen what happened in the last week.
Yeah, I think definitely that was the case. Um, like I said, super unfortunate that over 2/3 of the team being out of contract was what drove a lot of that. I know a lot of people refer to like the date. Is it the date? Day one of free agency. The reality is all the discussions are happening. Well before. You're always talking to agents even throughout the season. The ones that are coming up to the last year of their contract, and this is what happens globally. And certainly that was happening with us. And so I don't put much credence that like day one of free agency is the date. And he has every right to test free agency and look at what other options are available to him. Each player should do what's best for them and their family, and nobody should slight them on that. And he's obviously made a decision to go and play for Adelaide, and we all got to respect that. And he says that's right, best for him and his family. And like I said, 100% respect that.
Can you maybe talk us through how it came to, I guess, giving the deadline of it? Because it's such a unique situation. We don't see the Bryce Cottons very often, if at all. This is really one of one when we talk about back in the legends of the past, the Gazeys, the Leroy Loggins, all of that. But in the current era, we're so used to having Bryce as the pedestal, and even listening to what he was talking about and some other things that have come out. It's the club said basically we have to give a line in the sand moment, unfortunately, that we have to go down this business side. As great as you've been for us, we have to kind of figure out what's next if you decide not to come back.
Yeah, and I think, with the start being, we'll just talk at the end of the season, was kind of one, and then we extended it and we extended it again. So, it happened many times. It was just we didn't have a set time frame on it. But like I said, at some point you're talking to other agents of other players, and, what Bryce does and decides, really impacts them and whether they're going to come back. And if we don't start to move on theirs, we could be potentially impacted. And we didn't want to end up in a position where we were waiting and waiting and waiting, and we're at a point where other players perhaps started looking elsewhere and signing elsewhere, because then we would be trying to build a roster with some of the key folks we wanted to bring on board who'd already signed up in other clubs.
He spoke really highly at the end about the love he has for Perth and will always have for Perth. As you've mentioned, he's always going to be a Perth Wildcat legend. And we've seen in this current landscape of society with social media, obviously people are going to react to it differently. But one thing that obviously stood out from what he had to say today was he talking about, it came across from his representation, the memo that the club is going to release about, okay, we've made this decision now to move on from the date because he's not ready to make his decision. Because of who Bryce has been for the Perth Wildcats, is that something where you thought, in hindsight, maybe we should have given it to him first to say, you know what, if we're going to move on, we'll let him do the due diligence with the fans to say thank you?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's his career and the same for any player. And, they should have the absolute rights to tell the fans and members. So no grudge and any of that. For ours, it was more, hey, this is the draft and, do you have any feedback on it? And based on the feedback from him and his representatives, we did do some changes before we put it out publicly. And like I said, I don't judge him in any way by getting that release out that he put out on Instagram, but before us at all.
He said ultimately, again, how he respected and understands the club's decision to move in a different direction. And as we continue to harp on about the business side, can't imagine there's probably a tougher business decision that anyone would have to make in the NBL landscape, especially with, how passionate the Red Army fans are, who understand and have lived and breathed success for so long. With all of that and what potentially could transpire over the next few months, what's the message to the fans out there? Is, I don't want to say so much closure on this chapter because it seems a negative connotation to what's been such a positive experience for everyone involved. But what can we tell the Perth Army, the Red Army, about what's coming in the future?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think we just got to remember, how, how much success we've had with Bryce, right? How great he's been for the team. Remember the great contribution he's done. 3 championships, 5 league MVPs. Certainly want to say he's always welcome to Perth. We hope the Red Army doesn't boo him. I hope he's applauded, other than when he was shooting free throws like we do every other opposition player. But yeah, I'll just say, what we're working on, and I can't really talk about any specifics, is, a great all-round team. Hopefully, I think you've said it yourself, a bit more defensive minded, but a more kind of well-rounded team. And, we always, if you've seen that for a long period of time, we put a team on the floor that can win a championship. And that's our ultimate goal, right? And obviously it's a, massive decision, horrible decision we had to make, which was wait longer and risk the whole squad and our success, or, make the hard call and kind of move on and build a roster with plenty of time to do that can win a championship. Because ultimately that's what I'm here for, is to try and build a team that can win a championship.
On that, are you a type of owner who would sit back and think, man, perhaps if we waited a little bit longer, it might have changed direction? Or are you strictly from a business side of, look, this is the decision we had to make, this is the deadline, we extended a couple of times, as you said, to get to a point, and now we just kind of have to move in this completely different direction, while still obviously acknowledging how great he was and how great he will always be as a Perth Wildcats legend?
Yeah, I'll just say, if we had a short turnaround, so him or his representative said, hey, we can give you an answer in this, period of time, I totally would have said, yeah, let's do everything what we can. We're going to delay things to do that. I mean, Bryce deserves that, and he's done so much for the club. And like I said, we did everything we possibly could to sign him with the time frame we had, given the reality of over 2/3 of our team out of contract. And unfortunately, we weren't on that. We're on a kind of indefinite, we don't know when a decision is going to be made type time.
I have to mention, as you talked about a bit about the building for the future and a well-rounded team, a lot of reports continue to pop up, and we're hearing a lot of whispers that not just Perth Wildcats, a lot of other clubs are just monitoring Paddy Mills. But is Paddy Mills a potential candidate? Are we looking at a Paddy Mills in Perth? I know there was a story that came out that had linked you to. Can you shed light on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, we were as confused as you are around the story about confirming that we were in talks with Paddy Mills. Was super surprised about that. I mean, I'll just say that, like, any high profile, great Australian or Kiwi basketballer playing around the world is on the radar of every single team in the NBL. And so, that's part of our role. And, do we, you know, I'm sure I would love, and I'll probably speak for every other club owner, would love to have Paddy Mills in the NBL at some point playing for their team. And, obviously no exception to that. But you got to look at, he's in the NBA right now. He's got his first child due in August. He's living in California. His wife's from California, I believe. Is it realistic for him to end up in the NBL in any team next season? I'm not sure, but I guess we'll find out.
I appreciate you jumping on, Mark. As you said, there's been a whole lot going on, and thank you for being so open and transparent about everything. And good luck with building the rest of this roster.
Awesome. Thanks very much.